In this shocking video, we reveal the hidden diary that exposes King Charles III and the terrifying conspiracy the royal family has fought to keep buried for decades. From forbidden rituals to life-and-death battles for power, this story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the British monarchy. It began with a leather-bound diary, its pages yellowed with age, hidden inside the hollow base of an antique jewelry box that once belonged to Princess Diana. The box was discovered during a quiet renovation of Althorpe House, Diana's ancestral home, after a storm unearthed a forgotten wing of the estate. A young restorer, Amelia Clark, stumbled upon it behind a false wall. She hadn't expected anything more than old receipts or love letters. But what she found chilled her blood. The diary was unmistakably Diana's. Her familiar, slanted handwriting danced across the pages, elegant, composed, but with erratic underlines and sudden ink smears that betrayed her hidden torment. Amelia couldn't help but read. Each word pulled her deeper into the cold grip of a royal horror story that had never reached the press. A tale darker than anything she had imagined behind the palace walls. Diana had begun writing the diary in late 1990, not out of nostalgia or romance, but out of fear. She wrote of voices in the walls of Kensington Palace, of a maid who vanished after seeing something in the corridor outside her quarters, of waking up with her bed sheets twisted into nooses. The public never knew. The cameras caught her smile, but not the shadows in her eyes. Then she wrote about Charles. Not the Charles the world saw, the prince with a reserved charm and rehearsed poise, but something colder. She detailed his obsessions with esoteric rituals, his frequent visits to a secret chapel deep within the Scottish Highlands, and conversations with the Circle, a group of aristocrats and clerics shrouded in secrecy. She believed they practiced something old, something predating Christianity. A line from the diary burned into Amelia's memory. Asterisk. They say they protect the crown, but I think they feed it. Asterisk. Diana described waking one night to find Charles standing motionless at the foot of her bed, his eyes vacant, murmuring in a dead language she couldn't recognize. When she called his name, he smiled, but it wasn't his smile. It was too wide, too slow, like a mask stretching over someone else's face. The more Amelia read, the more she felt watched. At night, the diary seemed to shift where she left it, pages turning on their own. A week after her discovery, the restorer's flat in London was broken into. Nothing was stolen except the diary. No signs of forced entry, no prints, nothing. But Amelia had made copies. She released the first pages anonymously online, causing a minor sensation in conspiracy circles. But it wasn't until a grainy CCTV still emerged, showing a man eerily resembling King Charles III standing near her building at 3:12 a.m., that the story took a sinister turn. 2 days later, Amelia vanished. The police found her front door locked from the inside, the chain still latched. Her kettle had boiled dry. On the wall, written in steam on the mirror, were the words, "She read too much." That was when retired journalist Frank Mercer picked up the story. Frank had covered Diana's early years in the public eye. He'd always suspected there was more beneath the surface of her tragedy. When he heard about Amelia's disappearance and the diary, he began digging. He uncovered connections between a long-defunct royal inner circle and unexplained deaths among the staff at Buckingham Palace. A butler drowned in a shallow fountain. a cook found hanging by his apron, an archivist crushed under a shelf that had been bolted to the wall. All had happened in the last decade. All were quietly written off as tragic accidents. Frank's next discovery nearly broke him. An audio cassette, marked simply *, 1996, Balmoral. It had been mailed to a now-dead priest in Cornwall, sealed in wax with the Prince of Wales crest. The priest's niece found it after his death and passed it along to Mercer, believing it to be of historical value. The tape was a recording, barely audible, of a woman's voice, panicked, whispering about the blood candle, and something she called the old father crown. The voice, it was unmistakably Diana's. And in the background, a man could be heard chanting. At first, the words were unintelligible, but as the pitch rose, the name repeated again and again was Charles. "Do you want me to continue?" Frank listened to the tape over and over, the chilling words sinking deeper into his bones. The chanting, muffled but unmistakable, was like an incantation, a ritual perhaps. He felt a sense of dread that he could not explain. Each word Diana spoke seemed like a final plea for help, a desperate cry for someone to hear her before it was too late. It took him weeks to trace the origins of the tape. The small, rural town of Balmoral had long been a retreat for the royal family, a place of both public splendor and private isolation. But Frank soon realized that there was more to the royal vacations there than anyone had ever guessed. Local legends whispered about strange happenings, long-forgotten rituals, and a shadowy history that stretched back centuries. The key, he believed, was in the reference to the old father crown. The name seemed to haunt him, replaying in his mind like a ghost. After extensive research, Frank found an ancient text, hidden away in a remote library in Scotland, that referenced a powerful and ominous relic known as the Father Crown. It was said to be an artifact of great power, a crown used by monarchs in a ritualistic sacrifice meant to ensure the continued reign of the royal bloodline. It was a dark secret, one that had been passed down through generations, well hidden by the royal family, concealed under layers of history and superstition. The more Frank uncovered, the clearer it became that Diana had been caught in the middle of something far more sinister than a troubled marriage. The old father crown was no mere symbol of monarchy. It was an object that some believed could grant eternal power to its wearer. To possess it was to control not just a nation, but something darker, something beyond mortal understanding. And Charles, as Diana had written, had become obsessed with it. One fateful night, Diana had ventured into the depths of Balmoral Castle, following an inexplicable compulsion. What she saw there, in the hidden chambers beneath the estate, was a secret gathering, a gathering led by Charles. The ancient crown was on display, placed on an altar, surrounded by a group of men and women, their faces concealed by dark hoods. They were chanting in a language that Diana could not comprehend. It was a ritual not for royal succession but for something else, something far more disturbing. Diana's entry had interrupted the ceremony. The diary spoke of her horrified realization of what was truly happening, and it was in that moment that she knew too much. She had become a threat to the monarchy's secrets. The royal family had known they could not let her live, for her silence was no longer guaranteed. But Diana had found a way to escape. She had fled to Paris with her sons, desperate to protect them and herself from whatever horrors Charles was involved in. The world believed the tragic crash in Paris was an accident, but the diary suggested otherwise. Diana's final moments, as she lay trapped in the car wreck, were marked by her frantic scribbling in her diary, as if she had known her time was running out. As Frank pieced the fragments of the story together, the more he realized that Amelia's discovery of the diary might have been no accident either. Someone had known she had found it, and someone was willing to do whatever it took to silence her. The more Frank dug, the more he came to understand the dangerous web of power, secrets, and bloodlines that stretched back generations. The royal family had been keeping far darker secrets than anyone had ever suspected. But now those secrets were unraveling. With each discovery Frank made, he felt the walls of a terrifying conspiracy closing in. It seemed that the monarchy was not just built on tradition and wealth, but on something far darker, far more dangerous. Frank was getting closer, but with every step, he sensed the shadow of the royal family growing longer. They would do anything to protect their crown, even if it meant sacrificing their own. And just as Frank was about to share his findings with the world, he received a call. The voice on the other end was low, controlled, and unmistakably royal. It was Charles, and what he said next would change everything. "Mr. Mercer." Charles's voice crackled through the phone, cold and measured. "You've gone too far. You've uncovered what was never meant to be known. If you value your life, I suggest you stop digging. Now." Frank's hand trembled as he held the phone, but his resolve was firm. He had uncovered the truth, and he would expose it no matter the cost. But the next morning, Frank was found dead. His apartment was locked from the inside, and there were no signs of struggle. The only thing left behind was a single, crumpled piece of paper with a cryptic message written in Diana's handwriting. Asterisk, "The crown always claims its own." Asterisk. And just like that, the story of Princess Diana's secret diary faded from public view, buried under layers of mystery, fear, and the unseen hand of the monarchy. But the whispers would never stop. They would never stop because some secrets are too dangerous to be kept hidden forever. Would you like me to continue? The world moved on, as it often does, but the chilling truth of Diana's diary never fully faded. It lingered in the corners of the internet, in the quiet conversations of those who had read the forbidden words, and in the haunted memories of those who had glimpsed the darker side of the royal family. Frank's death, though officially ruled as a heart attack, had sent ripples through the press, but no one dared to speak of it for fear of what might come next. Amelia, too, remained a ghost, her disappearance swept under the rug of polite society. Her name was no longer spoken in the public eye. The police had stopped searching after a few months, claiming they had no leads. But those who had worked with her, those who had known her, knew that she hadn't simply vanished. The diary was still out there, and so too was the danger that came with it. Then, in 2022, a seemingly unrelated event set the stage for everything to come crashing down. A respected journalist named Elena Markova, from Moscow, stumbled upon an old archive during a routine investigation. She had been following a series of royal stories for years, fascinated by the ties between the Russian royal family and their British counterparts, and had recently been digging into the history of the Romanovs. But what she found in a forgotten section of the Russian archives shocked her to her core. A series of confidential memos between British and Russian officials from the 1990s, all related to Diana's death. Elena's eyes widened as she sifted through the documents, piecing together a tale of manipulation and power far greater than anything she had imagined. There, in black and white, was a mention of the old father crown, an artifact not just tied to British royalty, but to a covert alliance between the British, Russian, and several other royal families. According to the documents, these monarchies had agreed to share the power of the crown through dark rituals, their bloodlines interconnected not only by marriage but by something older, something rooted in ancient, forbidden magic. Elena's investigation led her to several secret meetings with high-ranking individuals, all of whom seemed nervous and evasive. One of them, a former palace insider, finally broke his silence. He told her of a ritual that had been carried out for centuries, a ritual in which the monarchs exchanged not just power, but their souls, in a pact made with ancient forces. It was a pact that required sacrifice, an innocent life, a life that would ensure the stability of the monarchy and its control over the people. Diana, with her independence, her will to break free from Charles and the monarchy's grip, had been the final straw. The more Elena learned, the more she realized how deep the conspiracy ran. It was not just about the British royal family. It was about a hidden society that controlled the fate of nations, a society whose roots stretched far back into the past, to the darkest corners of history. And then, one evening, as Elena was reviewing her notes in a quiet cafe, her phone buzzed with an anonymous message. The text was simple but chilling. Asterisk stop. Before it's too late. Asterisk. Elena had no idea who had sent it, but the weight of the warning pressed down on her. She couldn't stop now, not after everything she had uncovered. She had to expose the truth. As she prepared to publish her findings, Elena was approached by a figure in the shadows. He was an older man with sharp, calculating eyes. He didn't introduce himself, but there was something about him that told Elena he was no ordinary person. "You're getting too close," the man said softly, his voice low and threatening. "The truth you're seeking is dangerous. If you continue, there will be consequences. For you. For everyone." Elena stood her ground. She had seen enough to know that the royal family's secrets were worth exposing, no matter the cost. She told him she would not be intimidated. But as she left the cafe that evening, the world around her seemed to shift. It was as though the streets themselves had become a maze. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. This time it was a photo of her own front door, taken from across the street. Elena's blood ran cold. She hadn't told anyone about her investigation, and yet someone was watching her. Someone knew. That night, Elena disappeared without a trace. Weeks passed, and the story slowly faded from the headlines. There were no leads, no witnesses, no clues as to where Elena had gone. Her last known whereabouts were just a few blocks away from her apartment, but no one had seen anything unusual. The authorities assumed she had simply left the country or decided to disappear on her own. But those who knew the truth felt a growing sense of dread. The royal family's darkest secrets had been exposed to the world, and for those who dared to uncover them, the price was always the same. The crown always claims its own. "Do you want me to continue?" Months passed, and Elena's disappearance became a whispered rumor, quietly buried beneath the weight of new stories and scandals that constantly seemed to flood the media. Yet, for those who had been touched by her investigation, the case remained an open wound, raw and unresolved. The world had shifted slightly, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something or someone to crack open the secrets that had been carefully sealed away for so long. But even in the shadows, some couldn't forget the terror that lay beneath the surface of the royal family's legacy. One person who refused to let go was Alexei Dubrov, an investigative journalist from Kiev. He had known Elena, once sharing the same office space in the depths of an old, crumbling building near Maidan Square. Elena's passion for uncovering the hidden histories of power and corruption had inspired Alexei to delve deeper into the world of royal conspiracies. When Elena vanished, he knew she had gotten too close to something that was never meant to be known. Her disappearance had rattled him to the core, and he couldn't shake the suspicion that her investigation into Diana's diary had become the very thing that sealed her fate. Alexei began combing through Elena's notes, rereading her articles, and retracing the path she had taken. He found himself drawn to the Russian archives she had uncovered, where hidden documents detailed connections between the British royal family and the Russian Tsarist lineage. It was in these dusty, yellowed papers that Alexei found something that sent a chill down his spine. It was a map, an ancient, cryptic map, marked with symbols that seemed to pulse with dark energy. The map was said to lead to an old monastery, a place that had once been at the heart of royal blood rituals, both British and Russian. The monastery had been abandoned for centuries, its walls silent witnesses to rites that were thought to have been lost to history. With nothing but a sense of urgency, Alexei set off for the monastery, hoping to find the missing pieces of the puzzle. It wasn't an easy journey. The place was hidden deep within the Carpathian Mountains, and local villagers spoke in hushed tones about the monastery, calling it a place of evil, where unspeakable things had occurred long ago. When Alexei arrived, the monastery was exactly as described. A crumbling relic of a bygone era, its stone walls covered in thick vines, its bell tower leaning precariously as if teetering on the edge of collapse. The air around it was thick with an oppressive silence. It was as though the world outside had forgotten it existed. Yet, as Alexei stepped inside, the feeling of being watched returned, just as it had with the diary. Every step he took echoed ominously through the vast, empty hall. Inside, among the decaying relics of forgotten faith, Alexei found what he was looking for. A sealed chamber, hidden behind a false wall. In the center of the room, on a pedestal, was an object he could barely comprehend. It was the old father crown. The crown was ancient, forged from what appeared to be silver and gold, with strange, twisted runes etched into its surface. There was a malevolent energy emanating from it, something that made Alexei's skin crawl. But what made his heart race was the note that was placed beside the crown, a final clue left for anyone brave, or foolish, enough to uncover it. It was written in the same handwriting as Diana's diary. The words were simple but haunting. Asterisk, this is the heart of their power. Destroy it, and they will fall. Asterisk. Alexei could barely comprehend the significance of what he had uncovered. This was it. The crown was not just a symbol of power, it was the key to everything. The monarchy, the rituals, the bloodline, it all hinged on the crown. Diana had known the truth, and now Alexei had it too. But as he stood there, staring at the cursed artifact, a deep, gut-wrenching fear gripped him. He wasn't alone. A figure stepped from the shadows of the chamber, tall and cloaked, his face obscured. The voice that emerged from behind the cloak was unmistakable, cold, and filled with venom. "You should not have come here, Alexei," the figure said. "You have no idea what you are dealing with." Alexei's heart skipped a beat as the figure revealed himself to be a man he recognized. Someone who had once been part of the royal inner circle. But this man was not Charles, nor anyone publicly associated with the British royal family. No, this was someone even darker. A man whose name had been erased from history, a forgotten ghost from the depths of a secret lineage that was tied to the crown itself. "I am the keeper of the old ways," the man continued, "and now you have found what was never meant to be discovered. You have touched the crown, and in doing so you have sealed your fate." Alexei tried to move, but it was as if the air around him had thickened, turning to molasses. He could hardly breathe, let alone escape. The weight of the man's words pressed down on him. "You see, Alexei," the man whispered, "the crown isn't just an object. It's a vessel, a gateway. It grants us control not just over nations, but over the very fabric of fate itself. And Diana was never meant to know the truth. She was meant to be the sacrifice, the final offering to the crown's power." With a swift motion, the man raised his hand, and Alexei felt his world spin out of control. Everything blurred, and his body was suddenly paralyzed, unable to move. The last thing he saw before darkness consumed him was the old father crown, its twisted runes glowing faintly in the dim light. And then silence. When the authorities finally arrived at the monastery, there was no sign of Alexei. No clues, just the abandoned crown and an empty room. His belongings were found in a nearby village, scattered along a narrow path, as if he had been dragged away. Some say Alexei's final fate was the same as those who had come before him, silenced for knowing too much. Others claim that the truth will one day surface again, that the crown's curse will eventually break. But for now, the story of the old father crown remains hidden in the darkness, awaiting its next victim. The royal family, it seems, has always been protected by more than just wealth and tradition. It is protected by something far older, far darker. And the cost of uncovering that secret is always the same. The crown claims its own. Would you like me to continue? Years passed, and the whispers about the royal family's darkest secrets grew fainter, buried beneath the weight of time. Alexei's disappearance was written off as another unsolved mystery, his name fading into the abyss of forgotten journalists. The old father crown remained lost to history, its evil power dormant, or so it seemed. But those who had dared to investigate the truth, who had come too close to unearthing the horrors that lay hidden within the British monarchy, were never the same. The shadows of what they had discovered lingered, creeping into their lives, poisoning their every step. In 2027, a peculiar event occurred that would awaken the truth once more. A researcher named Nadia Petrov, a young scholar from St. Petersburg, stumbled upon an old manuscript in a second-hand bookstore. It was a book she had never heard of, written by an anonymous author. The title was unremarkable, / The Bloodlines of Power. But inside, its pages were filled with disturbing references to the royal families of Europe, including a chapter on the British monarchy. Her eyes widened as she read, for what she found was familiar. References to the old father crown, to Diana's diary, and the blood rituals tied to the monarchy. Nadia, curious and intrigued, began to investigate further, unaware of the dangerous path she was walking. As she delved deeper into the manuscript's cryptic passages, she began to see patterns that aligned with everything Elena, Alexei, and Frank had uncovered. It was as if the dark truth of the crown was being revealed to her, one horrifying detail at a time. But the deeper she went, the more she felt the same dread that had haunted those before her. She had seen it too many times before. People who uncovered too much were never heard from again. The very night she decided to take her findings to the press, she was visited by a figure in the shadows. "You think you can expose this?" the voice whispered. "You think you're different, but the crown claims its own." Nadia's last entry in her journal, written hastily, simply read, "Asterisk, I've made a mistake. They're coming for me." Asterisk. The next morning, she was gone. Nadia's disappearance was the final signal that the truth about the royal family's dark legacy was too dangerous to be known. The world continued to turn, blissfully unaware of the horrific forces that controlled it from the shadows. The old father crown, its curse, and the royal bloodlines remained hidden, protected by an invisible hand that would stop at nothing to keep its secrets buried. But there are always those who seek the truth no matter the cost. And though the crown has claimed its own, the whispers of its power continue to echo, waiting for the next soul brave enough to uncover what should have stayed forgotten. For the crown is eternal, and its claim is unbreakable.